All right, let's talk about a country that by all rights probably shouldn't even exist. I'm talking about Singapore. You look at it on paper and it just seems destined to fail, but it didn't. In fact, it became this incredible global powerhouse. So how on earth did they pull that off? Let's dive in and find out.
You might hear Singapore called the Little Red Dot. And what's fascinating is that name actually started as an insult. A neighbor used it to basically call them insignificant, just a tiny speck on the map. But Singaporeans, they completely flipped it. They took that insult and turned it into this badge of honor. It's become a symbol of their defiance, a way of saying, yeah, we're small, but you better believe we're not insignificant.
And that really gets to the heart of it, doesn't it? That's the big question we're tackling today. How does a tiny island, smaller than a lot of major cities, with absolutely zero natural resources, how does that place become one of the richest and most powerful countries in the world? Well, the answer is a wild story of pure pragmatism, some really tough decisions, and just this relentless focus on the future.
Okay, so to really get how Singapore works today, we have to go back to the very beginning. And let me tell you, its birth as a nation wasn't just humble. It was messy, it was accidental, and frankly, it was pretty traumatic.
So if you look at the timeline, things moved incredibly fast. For centuries, it was this trading port called Temasek. Then it becomes a key British colony. Then a horrific occupation during World War II. But the real whiplash moment, that happens in the 1960s. So after getting independence from Britain, Singapore actually decides to join up with its big neighbor, Malaya, to form the nation of Malaysia. That was in 1963. But it didn't last. Just 2 years later, thanks to some major political and racial conflicts, Singapore was basically kicked out, fired from its own country. Suddenly, it was all alone.
Just try to put yourself in their shoes in 1965. You're suddenly in charge of a brand new country, and you have nothing. Literally nothing. No oil, no wood, no farms. Your population is this tense mix of different ethnicities and religions all crammed together. You're surrounded by neighbors who aren't exactly friendly. Oh, and you have a tiny little market and tons of people without jobs. The odds, they were basically zero. This should have been a failed state.
But here's where the story takes a turn. Facing this completely impossible scenario, the country's founding leaders, especially the Prime Minister, Lee Kuan Yew, they didn't just give up. No, they sat down and created this incredibly bold, radical blueprint for how to survive. And it was all built on one thing: cold, hard, unsentimental pragmatism.
So what did they do? They looked at their biggest nightmares and just tackled them head on. For example, problem number 1, deep-seated ethnic tensions that could literally rip the new country apart. The solution? A public housing system that deliberately mixed everyone together, and a special political system to make sure minorities always had a voice in parliament. Okay, next problem. You're a tiny, defenseless little country. The solution? Make military service mandatory for all men, creating a powerful citizen army that would make anyone think twice. You see the pattern? For every single problem, there was a direct and often very strict solution.
And here's another classic Singapore problem that they saw coming a mile away. What happens when your country gets wealthier? Well, everyone wants to buy a car. But what happens when everyone buys a car on a teeny tiny island? You get complete and total gridlock, 24/7. So, how do you solve that?
Well, they came up with something totally unique, something called the Certificate of Entitlement, or COE for short. Now get this, the COE is not the car. It's literally just a piece of paper. It's a license which the government auctions off that gives you the right to own a car for 10 years. So by deciding how many of these certificates to release, the government can control the exact number of cars on the road at any given time. It's kind of brilliant in a way.
And the real-world result of this policy? It is absolutely mind-blowing. In the last few years, that single piece of paper, just the permission slip to buy a car, has cost around 100,000 Singapore dollars. And remember, that's before you've even paid a single dollar for the actual car itself. It makes Singapore by far the most expensive place on earth to own a car. But it works. The city's roads aren't clogged. And that right there is the Singaporean philosophy in a nutshell. The good of the community comes before what any one individual might want.
So what was the end result of all these bold, sometimes controversial top-down plans? Well, it was nothing less than the complete reinvention of a city.
You often hear this phrase used to describe Singapore, from third world to first in a single generation. And you know what? It's not an exaggeration. It's absolutely true. Think about that. Within the span of one person's life, they went from a poor, developing nation full of swamps and shanty towns to a sparkling, futuristic first-world city. It's a genuine economic miracle.
And the kind of society they built is, well, it's one of the most deliberately multicultural places on the planet. The government actually has an official model for its population, called the CMIO model. That stands for Chinese, Malay, Indian, and others. And policies like that housing integration we talked about, they were designed specifically to manage this delicate mix and make sure no single community felt isolated or left behind.
And if you think the ethnic diversity is something, just look at the religious diversity. It's even more incredible. In fact, research shows it is the single most religiously diverse country in the entire world. And here's the key. Religious harmony isn't just a nice idea in Singapore. It is strictly, and I mean strictly, enforced by law.
Today, the symbols of modern Singapore are famous all over the world, right? You've got Changi Airport, which is always winning world's best airport. You've got the incredible street food, or hawker culture, which is so important it's protected by UNESCO. They're even transforming from a garden city to a city in nature, a place where you can literally see wild otters swimming in the downtown rivers. And of course, it's become this absolute titan in global finance, shipping, and high-tech stuff like semiconductors.
But, and this is a big but, the story is far from over. Because the very things that made Singapore so successful in the past have created a whole new set of really thorny problems for the 21st century.
And maybe the biggest threat of all comes down to demographics. So, like a lot of other wealthy countries, Singapore's population is getting older, fast. They call it a silver tsunami, and it's putting huge pressure on everything from healthcare to the economy. But what makes Singapore's problem so serious is that this aging wave is crashing into another, even more dangerous trend.
And that trend is its birth rate. Singapore has one of the absolute lowest fertility rates on the planet. Right now, it's sitting at just under 1 child per woman. Now, as you can see on this chart, just to keep the population stable, you need a rate of 2.1. That massive gap you see, that's a huge problem. It means for every 2 people in one generation, there's less than 1 person being born in the next. People call it a demographic death spiral, and it is a slow-burning crisis that threatens the country's entire future.
And that brings us to the big final question. Look, the Singaporean formula, that mix of super pragmatic, long-term, government-led planning, it was a spectacular success for solving 20th century problems. Things like building houses, creating jobs, ensuring security, they nailed it. But can that same top-down approach solve the much more personal, much more complicated problems of today? Problems like an aging population, a collapsing birth rate, and a younger generation that wants more personal freedom? That is the billion-dollar question that's going to decide the next chapter for this incredible, improbable nation.